Hello everyone, I am Tacit and I'm going to be going over the Gems of War event objectives in full Bloom event in which the Bloom Manatee is added to the game. So this week is finally the week of everything. It is by far the busiest week of the entire month as far as everything we have. We have the start of the summer event. We have Guild Wars for Dwarf, which we just had 2 weeks to get a bunch of various dwarves to help assist with the event as well. And we have gotten the final week of the current campaign, which means this is the last week you'll have to deal with Submerge gems for the most part, as far as them falling from the sky and everything. So overall, yeah, pretty nice week. And I'll be going over all of it. So, first, where should we even go? Let's go start with, well, I guess teams. Probably make the most sense. We have a lot of teams to show, all of which are in the description below. So, raid event, pretty standard. You use the new raid troop, which in this case is the Caspian. And aside from that, yeah, that's pretty much all you need to do. Just build out a bunch of damage to kill out the other three. Use your captain to kill out the raid boss, and just have some amount of mana accumulation on the team to get everything rolling. For this first team, we're using Peskia for its insta-kill devour in order to go kill everything other than the boss. And of course, the captain itself to go and just target down the boss. And everything's in the middle just for mana accumulation. Azura is a pretty nice mana accumulator for both the events this week, as far as raid events and Underspire. They're both pretty similar, except for the fact that in raid event, you are basically forced to have to use Caspian on your team, whereas in Underspire, you have a little bit more flexibility to put another damage source there, another mana accumulator there, and don't have to go specifically him, whereas for raid event, you do. But Azura is probably going to be one of your main mana accumulators for this place. Ends up dispelling all enemies, so you get to get rid of Submerge, barriers, stuff like that. Has a bunch of mana accumulation. Can also end up reducing their HP, which is relevant for some other true damage options, particularly on the low rarity team. And if you were to get any one weapon this week, probably the 3 Graves. Out of all of the weapons for mana accumulation from Rarity, it is the most consistent. So if you want that for the raid event or Underspire this week, it is probably the most consistent one to help you out. It also has resummon, so if you start losing troops, particularly on a lower rarity team, you'll have backup for it. For the lower rarity team, we're just using Caspian in first slot because you generally just need to tap the mythic once or twice, or the boss. And then after you do that, you don't really necessarily need it that much. Beyond that, we're using 3 Graves for resummon, so when it does die, you end up getting a resummon there. Azura for our mana accumulator, once again, with the weapon. And then we're just using Deep King as our main damage source here. Really good if you don't have it currently. All you have to do is just throw some Chaos Shards at Sea of Sorrows, and you'll end up getting pretty easily. And if you don't have any of the other mythics or anything else from the kingdom, is probably going to be your best damage source. And even if you do have them, it is still a pretty decent damage source. Has true splash damage, so even the splash damage is true. The 50% that it does to the 2 adjacents. It gets a lot of overall damage. Biggest downside, like many troops, it has no follow-up, but it gets a lot of value for when it ends up doing its abilities. It's almost like a little Tina 9000 in that kind of sense, in that no follow-up, but does a pretty substantial amount of true damage with its ability. I guess somewhat Tesla too, though it doesn't upscale in the same way. Though things that do upscale in the same way, we have a brown-blue restriction for that of Underspire. It is that of Sea of Sorrows for brown-blue this Tuesday. Of course, you're allowed to use any color hero weapon now. We're just using Aberral Crystal to get a bunch of mana accumulation. You can use anything here that you want to use as your mana accumulation option. Then we're just using a pretty standard Guards Avatar quick kill team. We're running Guards Avatar Sirqua and Hadley. This sends a boost ratio and based on all armor. And we'll basically just one-shot all the way up to the entirety of the Tuesday event, assuming you're just doing the event completion and not a 500 run. And we're just using Soothsayer as a mana accumulator. Oddly enough, Brown really needs a like empower to brown while creating brown kind of troop, as we have it for a couple colors, but I feel like brown out of any color has probably the most lackluster empower currently in the game compared to any other color. Though we do a Bork, so we're using Bork here for the higher range team, as far as the all the way to 500. We're using Bork with a mech class, basically pure Adana. We're using Wand of Stars to mana accumulate, Bork for mana accumulation, as well as 50% mana star alpha mech, so you only need 6 to get it rolling. And then, of course, Tesla is our main damage source with its boosted true damage to go and scale throughout the entire battle. And for the most part, you should be able to 2-3 shot all the way up to the end of the event. Beyond that, as far as pure faction, pretty straightforward. You basically spam Deep King. You do tend to offset a little bit. Hammerclaw, really tanky, 50% reduction, as well as having a life gain. Keep in mind, it is only a life gain, unlike a bunch of the other ones that normally have a very substantial attack gain. This thing only gains 4 attack, so it's not particularly relevant compared to the ones that gain, like, you know, like 50-50, 100-100, something similar as far as their durability and attack. But yeah, he is basically just doing this to not die. You essentially only cast him if he's at threat of dying, otherwise you just keep him there and mostly just spam Deep King and Sea Witch. Sea Witch for your mana accumulation and to keep your first slot alive even more, and Deep King as your main damage source, and you just keep spamming this until you win. It's also your main damage source for raid events and Underspire this week if you need low rarity options for it. As far as the Tidecaller class is concerned, this is a merfolk restriction, specifically from that of... gosh, what did I forget the place? Merlantis. Merfolk for Merlantis. But anyways, we're basically just going all the water link options so we get the full amount of bonus here. Keep in mind, one thing for this week, especially if you want to end up utilizing some for Guild War, though you probably won't be due to the heavy dwarf restriction. However, one thing to note is Tidecaller does have 20% extra stats this week. So if you really need your hero up and have a lot of damage for whatever reason, yeah, 20% extra stats will help out quite a bit. This isn't relevant for too many things, but it could be relevant for Raid, Underworld, or Underspire, I mean, and the Tidecaller class event this Thursday. And that's the main thing we're doing here. We're just basically using whatever our best blue weapon is. This case Ruby, you can also go Dawnbringer, you can also go the Frozen Orb, and just whatever your best blue weapon is that hits all enemies, and just go do that with the 3 mana link ones. And you have a bunch of stats, 20% extra on your hero, and you also have 50% mana start, so you just kill it out very quickly. As far as Underspire is concerned, very similar to Raid event, you can literally just copy paste it if you really want to. However, you don't have the Raid troop with double magic, so you are most likely going to have to replace it for either another damage source or another mana accumulator. In this case, for the high rarity team, we end up replacing for Aquaticus. Ends up having a decent amount of damage and a good amount of mana accumulation as long as there's blues on the board. And given the Piskia creating a billion blue, you're probably going to have blues on the board. Other than that, as far as the Underspire low rarity team, we end up replacing out our 1 troop for the Chris Turtle. Really tanky, has 50% score reduction, and ends up converting any color you want into brown while also gaining barrier and submerge itself, so even tankier on top of what it already has. And of course, brown mana accumulation can fill not only into your main mana accumulation option, but also into your main damage source. And yeah, then you're just good to go from there. As far as Guild War, so of course, the big Guild Wars this week, we have Dwarf Restriction. This is what, the 3rd Guild War under the new format. I'm actually not sure what shiny we're getting this week. If I had to guess, I would hope it's Highforge. Because that'd be pretty fun. Highforge is already forced to be used on every single dwarf team. So if he was to be the shiny, I really hope, fingers crossed he is. I didn't actually check. But hopefully he's the one that gets shinied. Because him being 13 mana cost with a slightly better ability honestly sounds really good. They would likely make his boost ratio even better, which is good because he actually is generally only used in 4 times dwarf teams anyways, for the most part. So him having a higher boost ratio would be great. If they did it like they did with that one Centaur troop, if he goes from like a 6 times to a 9 times boost ratio, really solid. Wouldn't be on most things, but he gets to also double hit with it, so not too bad. Same as Artima. It would actually be the same amount of benefit that Artima gets from it, except unlike Artima, this thing's actually good. Just because it's basically required for dwarf teams. He was available last week. I sure hope everyone ended up getting him, because if you don't, this Guild War might be a little bit annoying without him. It's definitely doable without him. However, yeah, if you do have him, you're pretty much building him on every team pretty much without fail. So yeah, definitely be utilizing him. He has a double poke, he has double stun, he has backup resummon, which for something like Guild War you're probably going to need. And most importantly, given that you're restricted to Dwarf, he also has 50% mana start to all Dwarf. So yeah, really great overall. But basically, we're just using Gimlet. Gimlet, you could either cast immediately or not. He starts with Empower. However, alternatively, if you're using it with Wand of Stars or any other option... Oh yeah, keep in mind, this is the first restriction for Guild Wars where we're allowed to run any weapon. It is a Dwarf restriction, unlike the last 2, which were, what, Broken Spire and Divinian Fields, which felt like a Centaur restriction, but it was a Divinian Fields restriction, not Centaur. Even though, you know, that place is pretty much purely Centaur. But this is the first time we've had a typing restriction, and because of that, we are allowed to run any weapon, or should be able to, for the Guild War. Which means you can run Wand of Stars, you can run Ruby, you can run whatever big damage weapon or support weapon you want. So this gives a lot more utility for what you can ultimately build, which basically means you're just going to put Wand of Stars and everything. Keep in mind, defensively for Guild War, Wand of Stars will get replaced with Prismatic Orbs, so don't do that. However, offensively, you should be allowed to use it just like you can for PvP. So yeah, you should be able to use it offensively, you just can't use it defensively. So don't set your defend team for it, but you can use it for your main mana accumulation when doing the battles with your Dwarf team. So for this first one, I already mentioned Gimlet for the Empower, Highforge for the 50% start across the team, Wand of Stars for mana accumulation. You're probably going to be using Rune Priest a lot for this. Of course, we do have the 20% Merlantis class. We also have of the Tidecaller. We also have, you know, just strong things in general like Elementals. However, one nice thing about Rune Priest, a couple things. We has Banishment, so we can get rid of Submerge, Barrier, stuff like that. Has Barrier on Brown, has all the standard immunities that all the other dwarves have and everything. And it also gets to start with Barrier, so even if you don't find that Brown, you end up getting it. But has a lot of Dwarf support. Gives a bunch of extra stats to Dwarf, has the Brown Storm, but most importantly, it itself is a Dwarf, so you will be benefiting from that 50% mana start as well as for team bonuses. Keep in mind, one of the other big reasons why you tend to be running this It's just from the sheer amount of team bonus that you're going to be able to get. Most teams are going to be 3 times, 4 times Kazale, as well as, of course, 4 times Dwarf if you're using a Dwarf hero class, as the rest of your team is forced to have to be Dwarf. So that's a lot of extra HP, a lot of extra overall durability, and would come out to be pretty useful in a lot of situations. This team's also pure red, oddly enough, so you do get that little bit of extra attack there. But yeah, and then we're using the Ghost King Grimhorn as our main damage source. Out of any dwarf in the game, he's by far the overall highest damage that you can get. Keep in mind, you definitely don't need this to be able to run the dwarf event, but if you do have it, he is probably going to be your main damage source, depending on the team that you're running against. If the team has some kind of really anti-skull mechanic, maybe not. But otherwise, this is probably going to be your main damage source for most of the event if you have it. As far as the mid-range team, we're actually running all in on Ruby. Something we haven't been able to do in the past is just use 3 mana accumulators from the current restriction and then just go into one big option. Keep in mind, you do have to be careful that this doesn't get Essence of Evil, which means you're basically forced to have to use a stealthy hero class, as in a hero class that gets stealthy on its third to last trait at level 40. This is to make sure that it doesn't get hit by Essence of Evil or some kind of similar mechanic, as this is a single damage source team. So if this ends up going down, you're in trouble. We do have Apothecary for Cleanse. Keep in mind, if you need that, if you're not running Wand of Stars, you basically have to run Apothecary on your team. You could opt to not do it, but you ideally want to have a Cleanse. There's just a lot of negative stats effects you're going to have to deal with in general in PvP-like situations. So you want to have one way to cleanse. Normally, you're going to use Wand of Stars for that, but if you're dropping Wand of Stars for a damaging weapon, keep in mind that you're pretty much guaranteed going to want to run Apothecary. Transform select color into brown, while also having Cleanse all allies, which is the main thing that you're going to be utilizing there. Gimlet, just a nice way to start up quickly, so I'll be using that. Gains a bunch of life, has that Enrage and everything. And Excavator ends up creating a bunch of red, and is boosted based on brown, which you're going to have a ton of, because not only Gimlet creates brown, but Apothecary also creates brown. And of course, both those 2 colors feed into your Ruby weapon, as well as your mana accumulators. So it's pretty much the plan there. Just mass mana accumulate, keep spamming your Ruby weapon, and end up winning from there. And as far as the low rarity team, we're basically just doing a Black Manacle build. We're using Gimlet once again for our mana accumulation, Apothecary because we're not using Wand of Stars, we're using Black Manacle, so we're using that to make sure we still have Cleanse and everything. Black Manacle just as a standard bread and butter, just really good AoE option. Ends up being good for quite a few events, particularly Thursday class events if you want to end up utilizing for that. One thing that's pretty nice for in a Guild War context, it does have a 20% chance to devour a random enemy, so if you end up proccing this, you're in a pretty good position to pretty much win out the battle. Obviously, it's pretty rare, but you are generally going to be getting it. In 5 Guild War battles, you're going to be getting at least 1, if not multiple devours, so it is going to come into play. It's just not something you can really depend on as a guarantee option. But for this, we're basically just spamming Black Manacle and, oddly enough, Highforge. While Highforge isn't the greatest of damage sources out there, especially with his ending of turn, for this event, he's definitely adequate. As even if you had to use him as almost like a solo mana accumulator, I mean as a solo damage source, you ideally want to have at least 1 other damage source while we're doing Black Manacle here. But worst comes to worst, he gets to resummon stuff, he gets to do a lot of damage, and of course the 50% Dwarf start, one of the biggest reasons he's used, and all the extra bonuses end up helping out a lot, especially when you're doing 4 times Keyzale like this, as you do gain a ton of durability. In this case, we do have quite a bit of upgraded. We're gaining just HP alone, like over 100 HP, so it ends up making a pretty big difference. Obviously, this will be lower if you have less kingdom upgrades, if you have the pets not as upgraded, but it's still going to be a pretty substantial amount regardless of what point you are within the game. So, yeah, a lot of durability to make sure you don't die. Helps keep the team alive for pretty much a whole extra hit, if not 2 hits. And they all have immune to devour and everything, so it makes them survive quite a bit longer. Next, we have the start of the summer event. Not sure if I mentioned it yet, but yeah, we do have a start of the summer event that's going for the next 2 weeks, this week and next week. Today's the first day of it. Keep in mind, this is a daily that you have to keep up the entire time, so do make sure to keep up with it every single day, as if you don't, you will end up losing progress on it and might have to spend more gems to get whatever goals you want to end up achieving with this. For the first team here, we just have a pretty standard, just quick kill Tesla teams. For the really early fights, you might just want to feed directly into empowering into something, but for the later fights, you're probably going to need to go and actually full mana accumulate for the entire team and be a little bit tankier just to make sure your Tesla doesn't end up dying. As far as the lower level range, we basically just went with a bunch of faction options. We wanted a common Firebomb just to get a little bit of mana accumulation off the ground, as this have empower into a few explode. You then go and have 2 other faction troops here. The Magma Dragon, which you get from Fire Rift, and the Mirage Queen, which you end up getting from Sunken Fleet. While both of them are a legend, they are faction legends, so they are always targetable. If you just use some of the shards from Tuesday, you'll probably be able to get one of them, if not both of them, from the Tuesday faction event, as well as just daily factions throughout the week if you don't already have them. And beyond that, yeah, we're just using Summer's Fury here. You could be using a bigger weapon if you have it as far as red weapons are concerned, but this is the cheapest one that you get just from leveling up Red Mastery, similar to Black Manacle in that you just get it automatically as you progress through the game. In the case of Black Manacle, brown and purple in this case on whenever you do Red Mastery. And not the greatest weapon out there, but does have extra turn chance, has the ability to red mana accumulate. And with your brown red Storm, you should have a lot of reds on the board, which will make it a little bit more consistent and actually land the extra turn. 6 spawn isn't that many, but it is enough to land extra turns still. It has all the teams, all which will be in the description below. With that being said, we did end up mentioning Summer event, so a couple things to note with this, of course, will be going on for the next 2 weeks. Basically just do all of these battles, and whenever it says to go and do an upgrade, make sure to do that upgrade. You ideally want to be spending 50 gems every single day in order to get all the rewards. All the rewards of note are the Summer Armor, which costs 500. This returns every single summer. The Power Orb, which is not a unique reward, but it is the cheapest you can ever get a Power Orb, only costing effectively about a couple hundred gems throughout the event in order to get, which is really cheap if you still need to go get Zolgoth, Catheric, stuff like that, all of the Power Orb mythics, as well as any future ones they might add, or multiple of any that already exist. We have a new troop of the Stanstone Sentinel. So this thing is not bad. It's definitely skilled for early game. If you're someone who started the game within the last few weeks or month or so, this is probably going to be pretty decent for you. Otherwise, I don't think you're going to use it too much, other than maybe in like a construction or construct restriction or something. But overall, it's not awful. It's just a lot of it is skilled really early game because a lot of it is static numbers. So later in the game when numbers are way higher, it doesn't do as much. But earlier on in the game, it can still be pretty solid. It deals a pretty underwhelming amount of damage, boosted by yellow gems and brown gems, and an okay boost ratio, 2 each. So let's say there's 10 of each on the board. That's, 20, so 40. So it's almost hitting 100 damage, which is still pretty low. And then it ends up gaining 10 to all skills. And if it ends up getting a kill, it'll end up tripling that and getting 30 to all skills. So this earlier on in the game, gaining 30 to all skills when you end up securing a kill, not that bad. Ends up making them a lot more durable, obviously a lot more damage, so we can one-shot a lot more consistently. Ends up having a bunch of skill reductions, so that's pretty nice. And honestly, this final trait, at least earlier in the game, isn't that bad. Ends up gaining a bunch of life, attack, and armor every single time you take an extra turn. And, oh wait, this is only to himself though, isn't it? I thought this was to your entire team. Gain a bunch of attack, life, and armor matching. Oh no, it's only to himself. Okay, that's not as good as I thought. I thought that was across the entire team. It's only to him. Okay, so yeah, it's basically just a really early game skill troop. Unfortunately, it is a legend, so you can't end up running it in Guild War. Overall, not as good as the last option we had. Honestly, one of the weaker options we've had for an event like this in a while. But that's a pretty high bar because honestly, we've been getting some pretty good troops from these recently. However, yeah, this is one of the more lackluster ones we've seen in a while. Definitely really scaled to early game, so if you're later in the game, yeah, you're basically never really going to be touching them, other than maybe occasionally some kind of construct team if you're lacking some other options. But in Elemental, there's so many better things that you could be running. And of course, the pet ends up just giving a bunch of extra stats to him, up to 5 to all once you end up getting it upgraded. And ideally, you want to buy the 6th time in order to get the exclusive golden pet. This will cost you 700 points. The golden pets have so far never returned for free. I think they've been, from money occasionally, where you can end up getting them back. However, they've never returned for free ever, and probably never will. So if you want to get them for completionist sake, it is purely cosmetic. But not only do you get a fully maxed pet for spending 500, but by the time you spend for the 6th one and spend 700 total, 200 for that final offer, you end up getting the golden version as well. So I highly advise prioritizing this, as it's not only a max pet for only 500, which is absurdly cheap, but is also the golden one, which is just another one to fill out your stack, so you have more overall pets for pet upgrades and everything. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Main priorities is 1 sandstone, 6 of the pet, armor if you don't already have it, and power orb. And you can end up doing that with 50 gems per day if you already have the armor, or 50 gems plus day and 100 on an additional day if you still need to go and get the armor. And yeah, it's pretty much the event. And just make sure to always go a higher one. It is red teams. And of course, oh yeah, did we not show red teams? Did I not go far enough down? Why do I feel like I didn't show the red teams? Did I not show red teams? I feel like I stopped at Guild War teams. But yeah, for red teams for this event, we end up running a Wand of Stars and a Tesla build. Very similar to one of the other teams we ran here, just using Scurvy to end up getting it up, as it does have to be a red. Has a green to blue convert. And for a lower rarity range of that, oh no, we went over these. And then you get to poof these from the faction, the firebomb to get things going. Yeah, we went over those. We have to use red teams for it. One other thing to keep in mind is in order to end up fully maxing out the pet, you do have to get the weekly from this thing. This basically, you just have to kill a bunch of brown enemies throughout the week. You're likely to end up getting this automatically just from doing standard dailies and everything. However, this is required to fully max out this pet, so do make sure to go and do that. I forget exactly how many kills this is in total, but I think it's like 200 something, which is not too bad over the course of the entire week. Getting it done in a day would take like a couple hours of grind, but if you were to just, spam and explore one location, if you want to get it done quickly, is by far the easiest way to get it. But you will generally get it just naturally throughout the week from anything else that you do. So as far as campaign, this is the final week of campaign, so make sure to go and complete it. I believe this is also the first opportunity to go get the new achievement, as far as the one that they added in the most recent patch, which requires you to do 2 full completions on a campaign thing, which generally if you're doing 2, you're going to be doing all 3. However, yeah, you should be able to finally unlock that achievement today. Today's the first time that's been available since it was released a couple weeks ago with the most recent patch to the game. Beyond that, we will probably be messing with this mythic on stream tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll also be streaming every single Guild War day too, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. But yeah, as far as this guy, he's kind of average. He's usable for quite a few things this week. You can use him for a raid event, you can use him for Underspire, and that's about it. But he ends up dealing a bunch of damage to 4 random enemies, boosted by Submerge gems at an okay roost ratio, not really anything crazy. And there's a 50% chance to jump the enemy team, which is guaranteed, as well as having more follow-up. Overall, it's continuing the trend of, for whatever reason, the campaign mythics just always being pretty underwhelming. He does have one interesting aspect to him. He is really spell tanky. Not only does he get Submerge whenever he takes damage, but he also has 50% spell reduction, and even ends up creating a Submerge gem every single time his turn begins, which can give Submerge to your allies too. But these 2 traits honestly makes him among one of the most spell-resistant troops in the entire game, having both Submerge and 50% flat spell reduction. The only big issue with it compared to something like Tina 9000 or the thing that has 75% reduction is it doesn't have any durability gain. So it doesn't have any way to gain more HP, more armor, or anything like that. So the amount that it starts with is pretty much all it has, unless you have something else in your team supporting it. Overall, nothing really too special with it. It's a pretty cool trait setup, but without the ability to really go behind it, it's not really doing much. If it had these traits but had a much better ability, it would actually be pretty useful. But the fact that it has good traits but a very underwhelming ability is going to make it very, very rarely used. Even something like the troop we were mentioning earlier, that one brown-blue troop that you can get from the faction of Sea of Sorrows, that true damage troop is overall going to be doing more damage than this as far as overall value, because it's doing splash damage 50%, it's going to be doing true damage instead of physical. It does it for only 15 mana cost instead of 25. So from a damage perspective, it's not a lot at all. You're basically only using it for its trait setup, and that is about it. But a big issue that a lot of tanky mythics end up having is what's the point of keeping them alive if they don't have a good ability to keep alive for? And it's an issue that a good handful of tank mythics have, and this tank mythic for spell damage is pretty much no different. I'll still be messing around with it tonight on stream when we go and do it, but for the most part, we probably won't be covering a video for it independently because I don't really see a use case for when you would really ever bring it out. It's a fun gimmicky troop, maybe in some kind of Melantis restriction, even in Guild Wars, you'll bring it out just to make sure you have one troop that won't die. But beyond that, it's not that good. Like most campaign mythics lately. Anyways, events that we have going on throughout the weeks. We kind of went over it earlier, but Tuesday we have ourselves the Sea of Sorrows event for brown-blue restriction, which means you can just Tesla it all down if you really want to. Wednesday we have the pet rescue. I believe this is either Merlantis or Merfolk as far as the bonus there. Thursday we end up having a class trial for Tidecaller. Overall, Tidecaller is basically just a more Submerge heavy version of Frostmage. It is very rarely used, as aside from this week when it has 20% stats and all the synergies for the event, it doesn't really have that much of a use case. It's basically just weaker Frostmage in most situations. However, it is very useful this week, so with 20% stats, with all the things that it does for Merlantis synergy, it is probably worth considering using for raid event and Underspire, but beyond that, you'll probably retire it for quite a while after that point. And then this Friday, we have ourselves the, what did I forget? I showed the team for. Oh yeah, Guild Wars. Duh. Because Guild Wars ends up replacing any weekend event. And of course, Thursday, Friday. Keep in mind, this is a weekend event that doesn't start on Friday. Guild Wars do start on Thursday. Actually, can we see it right over here? Right over here, yeah. It starts on Thursday the 19th, right over there. So it does start one day earlier than other events, so do be mindful of that, as Guild War is an event nowadays that you do have to do every single day. So not only do we have a summer event that you have to do every single day, that if you don't do, you lose value on, but we also have a Guild Wars that you need to go do every single day. So honestly, it's almost better to have them at the same time, because if you already have to do one event every single day, you might as well have the two. So yeah, on both Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, there are basically 2 events that you have to do every single day, which is actually relatively rare, because a lot of events in the game, generally speaking, you could just wait until the weekend. Like Tower of Doom, I ended up doing a bunch on Monday, and then I literally finished it on Sunday, just using all the sigils to boost up and everything. So there's a lot of events like that that you can kind of delay till like the weekend and just go and do it all at once when you have some time on the weekend. But both Guild Wars and the summer event, you do have to do every single day. The summer event for all the red tiles, and the Guild Wars from the 19th to the 22nd, those 4 days there. So they are mandatory dailies. So unlike a lot of other events, you can't just skip them for a couple days and wait till the weekend. You have to do those every single day. So do be mindful of both of those throughout the week. Otherwise, you will lose value on getting all the rewards from the current summer event. And of course, you'll be hurting your guild as far as Guild Wars, as far as getting all those rewards from that. Anyways, other things. Raid event, I don't think I actually went into the raid event menu, but pretty straightforward, standard raid event. The raid troop itself has double magic and double score. You pretty much want to be using him every single time. If he does die, you still get to maintain the double score. He just has to be on your starting team. You can keep him alive if you want to utilize his double magic. Though in the case of lower rarity teams, your main damage source is actually true damage rather than physical, so you don't actually have to keep him alive in that situation. For the most part, you tend to just buy to tier 3 unless your guild needs more help beyond that. Tier 3 ends up giving you the troop that you can end up getting, and you can end up blue orbing him twice if you want to get him maxed, or once if you want to get this one to save a blue orb. And this weapon is pretty useless, like a lot of the weapons they've been doing recently for this. Any of these damage weapons that they ever add for this, even in early game, I don't feel like do enough damage to really ever justify using them. Just deals a bunch of damage to the first 2 enemies boosted by Merlantis allies. Even in the context of this event, it just is not a good enough damage source weapon. You're better off just using the Trident that's in Soulforge in order to go mana accumulate. Oh, that reminds me, Soulforge. So Soulforge is pretty lackluster this week overall. But if there is one thing that you want to get, I've been mentioning it a couple times, but it is probably this Trident. You're not going to be using this too much beyond this week. However, in restrictions like Merlantis and restrictions like pure Merfolk, like 4 times Merfolk, 4 times Merlantis, it is pretty good. It's just a standard, just nice mana accumulation, not die kind of weapon. Ends up exploding a bunch of blue, grants a random possess effect to all Merlantis allies, and then summons a Merlantis troop. It's a really safe, decent mana accumulation option that has a bunch of resummon on it. So it's going to be the main weapon that you probably want to use for both the raid event and Underspire. So if you don't already have it, might want to scrap together the resources to get it. Definitely not required for either of those 2 events, but can be very, very helpful this week, and pretty much only this week. But a lot of these weapons are like that. Like Iron Wave isn't that bad either, but it's one of those that you only use with pure Merfolk teams and stuff like that. A lot of the weapons that are available this week are pretty much useful this week and never much beyond that. And as far as mythics, pretty skippable overall, unless you want to get them for completion's sake or anything. Every single mythic that's currently in Soulforge, you can pretty much live without having, and you'll be fine. There's not really anything too over the top this week as far as options. So, actually, we do have Carandera, which is kind of interesting. I just feel like ever since Wand of Stars, the need for Carandera or even Obsidious, given that Elementalist is basically taking that role, you just don't really need the 4 times Curse, 4 times Stun anymore. In the case of 4 times Curse, obviously we have Wand of Stars. In the case of Stunning, while 4 times Stun is nice off of Obsidious, you have Elementalists that can do way more than that per like value overall, given that even though it only does it 1 at a time, it applies a billion different negative status effects. The most useful ones, of course, being Stun and Freeze, but Entangle, everything else, Burn, all still very, very, very useful as well. So very rarely that you tend to ever need to use Carandera or Obsidious, but it is a pretty interesting combo. And that when you end up doing this, when it ends up triggering, you use your Carandera in front of your Obsidious, and you have a 50% chance that you'll both curse and stun the entire enemy team in 1 single extra turn. Not really a gimmick used too often, but it can be pretty useful if every single enemy on your opposing team can be curse stunned, as you get a lot of value from that if they have really good traits. Like, for example, one team that's really good against is a Takshaka team, if they were running like 3-4 Takshaka, stuff like that, or, like a double Takshaka team. Any of those kind of things, it can shut them down pretty much immediately. Same as Pharaoh teams, ends up stopping all their mana accumulation and keeps them from stopping the mana accumulation, so you get to not need to deal with it for pretty much the whole duration of the battle. So very niche when you end up bringing it out, but I guess it's not completely useless. It's just Wand of Stars to basically replace that mechanic in the current state of game. And, oh yeah, event keys. So as far as our event keys, it is for Merlantis. Merlantis, not the greatest as far as options. Don't forget, if you haven't been, you can go to the shop underneath the resource section and get your 10 weekly event keys, which is very nice. Does cost a little bit of glory, but it's definitely worth it for the amount of glory cost and the overall amount of reward you get in return. But as far as Merlantis, oh no, it didn't save it. Oh no, I set it up earlier, but didn't click save filter. Oh well, let's go set it up real quick. Not all colors, any color, base rarity, show all. Okay, that's everything. Alright, so everything that is and is not in drop table. So the things that are not in drop table include the 5 faction troops from Sea of Sorrows. Those are only from throwing Chaos Shards at Sea of Sorrows itself. Other things that are not in the drop table include the current raid troop. This is only from the current raid shop this week. It will be in the drop table next Merlantis event, but this current Merlantis event, you can only get it from the current raid shop, from the raid event. The King of Cups is only from the current Kingdom Pass or Season Pass. which ends up ending this week. So if you need to go finish that out, make sure to do so. And similarly, the Dagonoth is also only from the current Kingdom Pass. However, in the future, this will be available from Vault Keys at some point in the future, though currently is not in Vault Key drop table. And this similarly will also be in the Event Key drop table and Standard drop table in the future for Merlantis. However, it currently is not in the Event Key drop table this event, so don't try going for it. If you were to throw a bunch of Event Keys down, the main things that you're looking for is honestly nothing. It is a pretty skippable week. It's nice to bolster up the kingdom for, you know, events like this because having things like an upgraded Zur, stuff like that can be kind of useful. But for the most part, you can live with most troops, or without most of the troops from this kingdom. I would say the only ones that are really over the top notable are Piskia, because it's among one of the better Devourers in the game, if you can get it looping. As it has out of all the double Devourers in the game, like the options that have more than one Devourer at once, is probably the best option for that. You could technically make the argument that Iron Gut is, because even though it does one Devourer at a time, it has extra turn at 100% consistency, assuming it's not frozen, of course. But it only does one Devourer at a time, technically. Whereas this, out of anything that does 2 or more Devour simultaneously, is the strongest thing in the game that does 2 or more Devour simultaneously. Like, you saw me kind of brush over Doomclaw in Soulforge, which also has a double Devour mechanic. But when you compare, like, Doomclaw to Piskia, there's pretty much no reason, if you have both, to really ever be using Doomclaw over Piskia, other than very specific restrictions, like if it's in, like, an Urskia event week or something. But Piskia, very, very, very solid. You don't generally see me using it too much because it's just really inconsistent. I'd rather use Iron Gut a lot of times, but it's still really good. Biggest issue with it is landing its extra turns. You kind of need a lot of green and blue mana accumulation onto the board in order to really make him work properly, as he needs not only a lot of blue on the board, but also a lot of green, so that he can still keep cycling his ability for extra turns. Otherwise, he hits a point where he doesn't really mana accumulate enough. Whereas something like Iron Gut, you just worry about your other troops mana accumulating for you. Whereas Piskia kind of does it himself. But in doing that, you kind of still need other ways to offset him, because if you only depend on him for mana accumulation, you're eventually going to run out of green on the board, as you'll be able to get like 2 good casts at most, and then he's probably not going to have enough follow-up. But yeah, that's pretty much the main thing. I guess Aquaticus is somewhat worth mentioning for Mythics. You get 4 times Submerge. The biggest dud is probably Undyne. He's okay against blue teams, because to silence all blue enemies. But it's very rare that you're fighting like a pure blue team these days. And even if you are in a context where the enemy is guaranteed to be pure blue, it is still very rare that you would end up bringing out Undyne, as he does end up ending out his turn, and you normally want something with a bit more momentum than that. But it can still be useful in some very niche situations where you're up against a 4 times blue team. Very rare in the current circumstance of the game, but not completely useless. But you're definitely looking for Piskia as far as Mythics. Piskia, highest priority, Aquaticus second, Undyne, probably the most disappointing. Though honestly, Dagonoth, whenever he's in drop table, will probably be the most disappointing of all 4 of them down the line. But overall, long story short, very skippable week to skip on event keys, unless you're really just looking to bolster up things for this current event week, or to hit a certain level on your Merlantis Kingdom Stars. Beyond that, we did get a new troop. As far as the new troop is concerned, we got the Bloom Manatee. As far as this guy, he ends up charming an enemy, which ends up hitting the 2 adjacent enemies, and then converts all red gems to Submerge gems. This would have been decent if it got Empower. Unfortunately, it did not get Empower, so I don't really see too much of a use case where it's really going to be used. Anything that ever has a mechanic like this is basically just a weaker Empower troop, unless they have like a really absurdly good follow-up, and this is not an absurdly good follow-up. It's a very average one that you'd pretty much expect with an Empower mechanic. But yeah, it just doesn't do enough. You're better off just using any Empower troop in the entire game that has converted a color into a color, because even if their side effect is a little bit less, at least they get to start with full mana, whereas this guy will struggle for mana in most battles. He also does not feed blue back into himself, which is also a problem because, yeah, you need a mana accumulator to basically help this mana accumulator. It's not self-sufficient, so not only does he not have Empower, but he's also not self-sufficient for his own mana accumulation. So overall, probably not a troop you're really ever going to be utilizing in that regard. But anyways, guys, I'll wrap it up for now. If you still have any other questions, feel free to leave in the comment section below. But yeah, don't forget to be doing everything for the current Guild Wars. Don't forget to set your defend team. I believe it's on Wednesday. I almost forgot to do it last time around. It's really weird. I'm not sure why, but the window for setting up your defend team seems really short compared to before. I guess in a sense, you only ever had Monday in the previous system, so it's not new that you only have one day to set up your defense. Oh no, it just feels weird that it's in the middle of the week rather than right at the beginning. Like, you'd kind of think like right at the beginning you'll be able to, but at the beginning you basically choose what area you want, which I normally go for green. Blue's the other pretty good one. Green and blue by far being the strongest too. Keep in mind, green, if you do tend to go blue, can be pretty decent, as some of the better damage sources are skull-oriented. Not only do you have Enraged Skull because of Gimlet, but you also have Doom Skulls because of things like, Bloodhorn or whatever that one guy's called. Basically, that one true damage guy that was red, blue, green from Droxzoom. Basically, all the Droxzoom ones. All the Droxzoom Dwarves, all the higher rarity ones tend to have a lot of Doom Skull mechanics, as that's where Doom Skulls originated from. So while they still will be able to hit some through Entangle, it's going to drastically reduce their amount of damage, which greatly reduces their overall viability. The other thing I really like about green Defend is every single path has at least one room that is really annoying to kill. In the case of top row, it is Divine, which has Takshaka, as well as Elemental, which if you haven't been already, you should be saving your Elemental for everyone who has Flower Dragon. As for whatever reason, Flower Dragon does not get replaced with Diamantina, but Stellarix does. Similar how Wand of Stars gets replaced with Prismatic Orb. So long story short, do not use don't use Wand of Stars and don't use Stellarix. However, one trip that is not nerfed in that regard is Flower Dragon. So you should be saving your Elemental defense for people in your guild to have Flower Dragon, as you can make a very absurdly strong team there. So you have that and Takshaka team. For middle path, you have standard Takshaka team, which is probably the weakest of the three. And for bottom, you have any of the standard Goblin infinite loops, which of course can be countered with freeze, but sometimes the freeze misses. Sometimes the Goblin team can go operational immediately. So even if it does get frozen, sometimes Goblin teams can still just auto win, as they're just annoying standard Goblins. So overall, I've personally always liked this format the most. But yeah, your guild leaders or whatever it is, I forgot how low the command is, can end up choosing what area you want to go to. But blue and green are definitely the main two that you generally want to do. Yeah, what does blue have? Let me go just select this real quick. But blue has, yeah, the problem with blue is its middle path is probably pretty weak a lot of times. Obviously, they have to go down all of them. Yeah, honestly, the main thing that's good about it is the freeze gem mechanic. Most of these paths honestly aren't that good. Dragon is nice on top because you can run Flower Dragon. Middle is pretty underwhelming on Dead and Rogue, especially since Rogue Spider nerf. Not the greatest. Giant can be good, but not a lot of damage pressure, just really tanky. Same as Knight. Like, they're really bulky, but they don't really have much of a means of winning. Like, they're really good at not dying, but they don't have that much damage, especially under AI control, as a lot of the teams composed around them don't, like, you know, auto-win like Goblin team does, where you give the AI the Goblin team, and it's like, oh yeah, it just functions normally, as if a player is pretty much playing it. Same as Takshaka teams for the most part. Whereas something like a, you know, 4x Giant team, for the most part, the AI is not going to use it correctly. Same as a lot of teams out there. But there's a lot of things that you can do to make it a little bit more consistent. The main ones being reducing how many mana accumulators you have, while still having enough to get everything rolling. But make it just so you have damage sources that can kind of loop into themselves. End up working out really good. Things like Takshaka, things like Goblin, stuff like that. End up working out really good. Same as Flower Dragon, stuff like that. As the AI will just keep spamming them over and over again if you get them into the right situation to be able to do so. But yeah, don't forget to do that. Set your defend team on Wednesday. Do the battles on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We have the red dailies every single day. Don't forget to be doing that. Don't forget to kill enough browns this week so you can go and max out the pet, as well as the other small little amount of resources throughout the thing. And yeah, a lot of dailies this week. Especially next 2 weeks, but particularly this week. A lot of dailies. Definitely the biggest week of the entire month, and yeah, pretty crowded. But a lot of things to keep us busy, if nothing else. Anyways, guys, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Thanks for stopping by, as always. Greatly appreciated, and I will catch you guys later. Goodbye, everyone!